O RedeMAIS Podcast recebe agora Robbie Schingler, que é co-fundador e Chief Strategy Officer da Planet. Thank you very much for being
Thanks
here.
for having us.
Thank you. Você vai perceber que essa entrevista vai ser feita em inglês, mas você tem a tradução para você acompanhar se você precisar de tradução. Robbie, yesterday in your presentation, you brought up important considerations about the future of satellite monitoring. Could you tell us something about that?
Well, it's a really exciting time in the aerospace industry. I think last decade we saw companies coming onto the stage with mega constellations. And Planet, we're an Earth observation company. And last decade, we launched more satellites than any other entity in the world.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We
How
had
many?
about 500 satellites we launched into space last decade.
500?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last year of the decade, in 2019, Starlink started to come. And so now, Starlink is number one. They have about 5,000 satellites in space. And today we have about 200 satellites in space. But they're two different missions. They are trying to connect the planet to the internet. And for Planet, we're trying to illuminate the world's most important change and build the tools to give that to our users so that they can take action.
Why did you choose this kind of monitoring?
That's a good question.
Thinking about
Yeah.
environment and security.
Absolutely. So we started the company, or I started the company with two of my best friends 13 years ago. And we were working
in California?
In California.
California.
We were working at NASA, one of NASA's research centers at the time. And we were building small satellites there for science missions. And it was a lot of fun. We were able to really disrupt quite a few things inside NASA, but we still wanted to move faster and we wanted to take greater risk in a new way, which was instead of building one satellite, we wanted to build hundreds. So it's a distributed sensor network. And when we thought about how to get that off the ground and how much money it would cost to do it, we decided to fit within a standard box that goes up to space as secondary payload. So it's relatively inexpensive in order to get access to space. So that was a game changer at the time. And when we thought through the types of missions that we can do, I can tell you, we brainstormed dozens and dozens of missions. And as being scientists, all three of us are scientists, we came up with missions that were mainly around science and exploration. And then when we overlaid, okay, what is the benefit to society and how are we going to pay for it? It quickly came down to either connect the planet to the internet or responsibly enable a transparent planet. And we chose to do the Earth observing mission because of the societal benefit associated with it, and that a lot of people really weren't doing things in Earth observation in a disruptive way. And the barrier to entry was much lower than in telco because satellite internet is telecommunications, which is a highly regulated sector. So it's lower cost to get access to a minimum viable product into the market. And when we looked at the problems of the world 13 years ago, let's remember, we didn't have the Sustainable Development Goals then. We had the Millennium Development Goals. And we looked at those, our global governments have been prioritizing the world's biggest challenges for quite some time. And when we looked at the Millennium Development Goals, this level of data is something that could substantially contribute to many of them. Subsequently, with the Sustainable Development Goals, 13 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals can be dramatically improved with this fidelity of data, which is not just spatial resolution, but the timely update of things. So the cadence of being able to monitor that. So when we were in our garage, we decided to do an Earth imaging mission. We came up with the mission then. That's still our mission today, which is to image the whole world every day and make global change visible, accessible, and actionable.
And what do you think about Brazil in this kind of work? What the work that has been made here by RedeMAIS? You use an expression in your presentation yesterday, like something about the state of art, right?
Yeah.
Why?
This network, RedeMAIS, is really just beginning. And it's accelerating tremendously. There's almost 100,000 users that have access to this platform. And last year at our first annual users conference, we had about 25,000. So it's growing substantially. And what's so inspiring to see is how data-driven it is. Being able to understand who's using it and also how it's changing the day-to-day operations of the enforcement community in one of the world's most important natural resources that we have, which is an intact, living, thriving Amazon. So what's state of the art about it is it's not necessarily the technology. It's actually bringing all three things together, which is you have a forward-leaning government agency in the Department of Justice executed by the federal police. And then they had the foresight of taking in new disruptive technology, which is this daily scan of the Amazon every single day, and artificial intelligence on top of it. Then the third thing is you have a deep partner in SCCon who really understands the day-to-day workflow. They're there to train people. They're there to support people in order to make that leap to a new workflow. And it really amplifies the efficiency of what people do every day. You know, when you log in the morning and you get the daily alerts, it reprioritizes your day.
And these alerts are very efficient, very comprehensive, and very broad. So it's and I think it's easy to use, right?
It's really just a website to look at. So if you can use Google Maps and Microsoft Excel, you know, then that's essentially the tool that you have there. Is it's intuitive to zoom around. I mean, if you are in law enforcement in a small town, you know that town like the back of your hand. And so, but now people are beginning to actually have a new felt sense of things, which is how are things changing? And is that expected or not? And if it's not, that's the anomaly. That's the thing that might pique your curiosity to then dig deeper, to understand a little bit more around what is that? Why did that happen? And importantly, what's next? And that's the revolution that's happening with this deluge of Earth observation data with that are all put into the cloud. So you don't have to manage this data anymore. But then with artificial intelligence tools and technologies that allow for you to ask those questions. It's not where and what, it's why and what's next.
That's a good point. How is AI helping with this huge amount of data?
Tremendously. I can tell you that we use AI technology in everything that we do inside of the company. That's how we're able to innovate relatively quickly. We use it on board the satellite, how we operate the satellites, but then importantly, how we process all of that data and then expose it to our Planet Insights platform. Then the Planet Insights platform is what our partners see. So they are able to then use the AI tools that we have in there to train a model. So if something changes over time and they know what it is, they can say, that means early indication of a flood. Then they can train their custom model. But importantly, our platform is really built for developers. And what we're trying to do is to cross the threshold from geospatial professionals who have to manage data and know the radiance and know all the science behind all of this Earth observation data, so that there can be orders of magnitude more people to get access to the power of this type of information because they're a software developer or they're a data scientist. So it's going from a custom bespoke industry to something that is really quite exciting, especially for young engineers, because all of a sudden you now have the world at your fingertips and it's a new type of superpower, a way of seeing, a way of knowing. Then you can ask interesting questions and then you can actually come up with your own unique product your own unique solution, and in some cases, your new company.
And what's next? What's the new technologies that Planet is developing?
I would say, so I'm a space guy. So I'm going to answer that question by talking about what's coming up in space. I worked at NASA for about 9 years before starting Planet, and we went public about 2.5 years ago. And with that level of investment, we've been building new space technology. And I can tell you that we have a lot of upcoming missions over the next year and a half. And the next one is as soon as about 3 weeks away from now. And this is a new satellite that has a lot of interesting technologies in there, and a new instrument. So it's going to collect a new type of data. And this data is a hyperspectral data. So most of the data all of the data that we have today is visible data and goes just into the infrared wavelength. So beyond what our eye can see, but it's super useful for understanding vegetation health. So vegetation health.
Okay.
So there's an analytic that isn't really machine learning based. It's actually based on science. That's a proxy for how healthy a crop is, and that's been in science for the last 30 years. And so that's the core thing that we do, and that goes up to about 900 nanometers beyond what the eye can see. 960 nanometers. This one goes way beyond, past 1,000, past 2,000 to 2,500 nanometers. So it can see a lot more things than we can with the eye. But importantly, it has filters on it. So it's not just like one grayscale scene. It has 400 different filters that go all the way across the electromagnetic spectrum. And so that data, when it comes down, is called the data cube. So it has 400, it's almost like one picture is 400 pictures, but it's just looking at one narrow piece.
Like layers of the
data. Exactly.
Data.
And so, just like if you have gone to a 3D movie before and you have the glasses and one filters one color, the other filters the other color, then it blocks out everything else and you only see color coming through that filter. This is 400 of those. And what that means for our users is that you can look deeper. You can see things that are invisible to the eye. And in fact, everything on the planet radiates at a particular frequency. And so you can train a model with AI that pulls the correct bands together that tells you this is maize or this is soy.
And one of these is for carbon monitoring.
Yes.
Right.
So
that's
our North Star for this particular mission. In space, you're going through the atmosphere. And so the atmosphere absorbs some things, but there are some windows in the atmosphere. And there's one window around 220, 230 nanometers that methane can be seen and detected. So that's the North Star of this mission. We partnered with a nonprofit called Carbon Mapper, where they want to be able to quantify methane emissions. So it's not just what's on the surface, but actually what's in the atmosphere. Quantify methane emissions down to about a 50 kilogram to 100 kilograms per hour. And that comes from super emitting assets, typically in oil and gas, or actually in waste dumps, and also in certain agriculture practices. You can actually see these emitters. And the thing is that most of the time, especially in oil and gas, that means it's a loss of product. So they're incentivized to then see it and then fix it. But it's important because the methane, CH4, is a short-lived greenhouse gas, but it's 80 times more potent than CO2. Yep. And so if we can now see that, then we can quantify it down to the facility level, then we can take action. And if we want to live under a 2-degree world, we need to get methane under control. And if you now have the ability to measure and report and verify against methane emissions, then governments can use public policy to create the right type of legislation and regulations in order to shift our industrial base and shift our supply chains.
Or to compensate it.
Yeah, exactly. In some cases, by shifting, it's like, hey, here's some money, clean up what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then if you emit more, then we'll fine you. So it's a carrot and stick activity. And that's going to be profound. It's going to be profound for the global climate community around being able to detect and quantify methane emissions, and then have that data be used in a court of law, have it be used to uphold regulations.
Great. One last question.
Yeah.
When will we have real-time monitoring?
Well, that's the other thing I'm really excited about the space technology. So our Planet Insights platform is there to look over a broad area, to look broader, to be able to zoom in and task a satellite to look closer, to look deeper with artificial intelligence, and also with these new data sources that are actually there. And the thing that will really make it real time is more on the satellite side. So I mentioned before how SpaceX has this Starlink constellation of internet satellites, thousands of satellites that then talk to one another and then talk down. There are 3 other very, very large commercial companies that are building similar systems. And what we've put on our next generation satellite is the ability to talk to those systems. And what that means is the satellite is connected to the internet in real time. And then the next thing that we have to do is that, great, you can get raw data real time, but that data is really big. It's really heavy. There's a lot of information in it. And sometimes you just want to know one thing, like, is there a new methane leak? Is there something that is moving that should not? Right? Like if you are in the Coast Guard and there's a maritime protected area, and then you can see that a ship is there and it's moving. You could actually upload to the satellite that little analytic. And so as the image comes through, there's a lot of computation on board the satellite to just look for that thing, and then immediately send it down via another satellite all the way down to the user in the boat in that example. And that's when it gets to real time. And so that really helps to enforce our regulations around security or environmental policy. But it also makes it even more efficient for people as they deploy as they change their workflow to bring in these new types of tools. I think RedeMAIS, this community, is already doing that today with the most advanced technology. And importantly, all of it is coming through our Insights platform. As these new technologies from space become available over the next 1 to 2 years, it will have built-in upgradability, and they'll be able to take the latest technology to make it even more real time.
Robbie, thank you very much
for
being here with us. Thank you.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you. And congratulations on this community for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
E obrigado a você também por nos acompanhar aqui no podcast RedeMAIS. Acompanhe os nossos próximos episódios. Tchau, tchau.